Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, covering all things pro wrestling. As always, live from No Cell Studios, I'm the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro. And joined on this Monday evening with the one bad Chad himself. What's going on, dude?
Not a whole lot, man. Just another week in the world, the wacky world of professional wrestling. This feels like an odd week for us just because I feel like we've been on this run of either previewing shows or talking about the fallout of shows. And now we're just getting to talk three big things of news. No shows to preview. What's the next show to preview? Is it
Final
World's
Battle,
End?
World's End. Yeah, I think those are the two shows we have coming up. And Final Battle is the 15th of December, but the way ROH is being presented, story for another time, but I don't know if that warrants a big story. I mean, that's more of the microcosm of what's going on there with the three letters of ROH.
Yeah, it's kind of become a bit of a get your shit right for AEW place. Go brush up until you do something really good and we'll bring you up to the main roster. It's almost like their version of Black and Gold NXT, but on a lesser bit of that. But I will say, like, just to give ROH a little bit of props, the stuff they're doing with Athena and Billy Starks is worth the watch. So I'll be watching the pay-per-view strictly for that. I mean, this is a storyline that's been going on for well over a year, and they're really seasoning up Billy Starks, who they signed. We're big fans of her. Go back in our archives. We had her on the show on Visits the Tavern probably 2 years ago, and she's killing it and quietly putting on maybe the best women's run right now in wrestling that no one talks about is Athena. I mean, Athena has been killing it, but outside of that, yeah, it's I'm interested to see how they put that card together.
So stay tuned to the quick hitters, guys. We have the two other matches added. I think there's 3 matches in total on this card for Final Battle. So we'll keep you guys updated. Like I said, it may not warrant a big story coming up next week, but you will know everything going down to decide whether you want to watch the show or not. But of course, man, the news cycle goes as fast as ever, and we are looking through the lens of really usually is a down period in wrestling. But as you mentioned before, with the return of Punk last week at Survivor Series, and it feels like AEW's full steam ahead towards this World's End pay-per-view, feels like we're not in a down period. And I think that is the benefit, one of the benefits that a lot of people, don't really talk about with AEW being around, that their seasons of boom, their WrestleMania seasons are just different ebbs and flows. We don't just piggyback on April and late March anymore. It's like there's something to look forward to every single month of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AEW's really changed the game as far as like the downstrokes and the upstrokes of the wrestling calendar year, because December for the longest time was kind of the dead zone. Let's hit it into cruise control and just make our way to Rumble and Mania season. But AEW, even before World's End's creation, they've always kind of made December feel special. Winter is coming. Kenny won the belt there. Sting debuted there, and that's became kind of a marquee tentpole Dynamite episode that we all look forward to. Now you've got World's End at the end of the year, and their New Year's Dynamite episodes usually pretty big too. So December's becoming a fun year for wrestling, and why not, man? We're all bundled up. We're stuck in our houses. It's too cold and dreary to go outside. Why not make it fun for the wrestling fan?
Absolutely, man. And, let's just not even waste any time. We have a lot of good stuff to talk about, the big stories. Let's get to big story number 1 about BRYAN Danielson.
Big stories. Story 1.
BRYAN Danielson is a catch-all for our big story number 1. And, of course, he was in the news earlier this week about the CM Punk stuff. And he really kind of shed some light on this, Chad, earlier in the weekend, saying on the Maggie and Perloff show, he confirmed that he was part of AEW's disciplinary committee. He didn't want to go into all the details regarding his CM Punk's firing from AEW following the altercation with Jack Perry, but he did have something very interesting to say. And you have the clip here. Let's just pop it on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a part of the disciplinary committee, and clearly, what happened has happened. You know what I mean? And I'm somebody who I like CM Punk. I think he brought a lot to AEW while he was there. There's not a lot I can say about it or that I really want to say about it. But yeah, I am a part of it. It's really funny because there is, how the internet is. Like, it's like some people would say I was the head of the disciplinary committee. And I'm like, listen, there were more than 3 people involved in this decision, but most of them were all lawyers. To say that I was the head, I don't even have a college degree. I'm not in there bossing people around or anything like that. But yeah, I am part of the disciplinary committee.
Was that difficult as someone who likes Punk and is a friend of his? Was it difficult to be a part of that committee where the decision is that he should leave?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody, I have a lot of empathy, but I'm grateful for the time he was able to spend in AEW, and he did a great job for us. And so, yeah, I wish him the best in his future, and I hope that his run there goes well.
I thought Danielson was going to hit him with the "I wish him the best in his future endeavors" line for a second, man.
He's in his he's in the James Bond villain era right now with the eye patch on. If you guys didn't see the video, but obviously you've seen him in action. I love it as well. And man, I just love the transparency on his end, where a lot of people would have justification in ducking that question. And yeah, he wasn't as direct as he probably would be over a few beers sitting in a bar somewhere, but he did mention Punk by name. He did talk about the committee. He confirmed all the reports. And I like that he also talks about the fabrication and how the wrestling universe, internet, IWC blows things out of proportion, talking about how he is this mastermind behind this committee. No, he's just well polished, loves pro wrestling, loves the culture of pro wrestling. But at the end of the day, it was out of his hands. It was out of anybody's hands. It became a legal issue that eventually had to be sorted out by AEW's law team. And that's what we saw.
Yeah, it seems to me like we've heard Tony Khan talk about how hypothetically, if there was someone and Tony, due to a health issue or an emergency, he couldn't be there to run Dynamite, that the one person he would trust to kind of make the right decisions would be Bryan Danielson. So it kind of goes to show you, like, he has, like he said in that clip, a little bit of empathy and clear-headed thinking that isn't going to be buried in some sort of like political maneuvering. I feel like he's just kind of a cut and dry down the middle type of dude. And I feel like that's why a lot of his fans love him when it comes to who he is as a person outside of the ropes. And what better guy to have sitting in a committee to be able to relate to the plight of the pro wrestler. I'm sure he was like giving us that empathetic side of like, hey, playing devil's advocate on just, hey, let's bury what Punk did. But he seems like on that committee, now I might be wrong, that he did say there were more than 3 people. He did say that most of them were lawyers, but I would be surprised if there was other wrestlers on that committee. I feel like Danielson almost maybe could have taken the place of, I'm here to be the voice of the pro wrestler, to have an unbiased opinion. And it just goes to show you how much weight what happened at All In has. The fact that Danielson would, I'm assuming he gave the advice like, hey, maybe it's best, we part ways with Punk. I like Punk, but you can't. We heard all the reports of just the temperature of the room in the locker room while all this was going on, the division it created. And look, man, no matter if you like the guy or not, it becomes bigger than just, I'm taking his side, I'm taking the elite side. It becomes like the decision is what's best for the mindset of the locker room. And no matter what, you had to make a call. And I think he was the right man for the job.
He's become the conscience of AEW. And 100%. I think the byproduct of all of this situation that boils down to the origin, all the way back to the Hangman Page promo from CM Punk, and then follow the path the way you want to. We've beat it to death. We've had the conversation, but the byproduct has been these outside character revealing moments for some of the talent in the locker room. Bryan Danielson being the utmost example of it, that he shows he's able to keep a partial opinion on a situation, look at through a lens that isn't just based on who he's friends with or how he feels in the moment. This feels like it's a well-calculated, well thought out type of process. And he is a leader personified. And I think we all knew that. We knew his passion for pro wrestling, but his aptitude to take on this role to eventually maybe be the successor in some capacity after his in-ring career, to be behind the scenes and be the guy making decisions, because it's very rare. I mean, this is one of the more gnarly things you're ever going to have to handle, as far as he knows Punk personally. He's worked with him for how many years across other promotions. They largely came up together.
Yeah.
And he still had the ability to kind of see the forest through the trees, of understanding that although we appreciate what he's done, we appreciate financially the growth that he provided AEW, because I think a lot of people on the anti-Punk side, they have to really wrestle with that on their own thing. He is still the biggest signing, like financially, for AEW in their history, and may ever be topped because of just what he brought to the company. So they have a lot to be, gracious for towards CM Punk. And I think that gets lost in people's fandom and opinion and all the things that go down. But yeah, Bryan Danielson, I think, has really showed this side of himself that I think everybody assumed was there, but rising to the occasion, just being the adult in the room, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It makes me even more of a fan of him. He is my all-time favorite in-ring competitor, but as a person, having met him at meet and greets and just knowing, the time he gives his fans, like, you don't really see this really revealed how really great of a person he is. And I that can't be understated. Like, having him in the company, where would this be without someone guiding the ship of this situation and no sound mind helping you get through this storm?
100%. I mean, he seems like a very genuine guy. He seems very level-headed, logical, and you said he's the adult in the room. He's taking on like a father quality to me. And I think this is really starting to show its head since Danielson himself has become a father. When you're a father, you have to make tough decisions sometimes. You have to you have to add some discipline to your kids, even though you love them. You have to make hard choices. And talking about the impact of Punk, the detractors of him, and I'm a fan of Punk, but I've also been hypercritical of things he's done, kind of self-sabotaging certain situations. But you're right, man. As far as like stature and the situation of him coming back after 7 years away from the business instantly made him the biggest signing they ever had. I would argue, from just a wrestler standpoint, Jericho and John Moxley were just as big as bringing them to the company, but they were wrestling. We didn't have 7 years to long for them to chant their names. Punk was kind of this elephant in the room that hung over pro wrestling for almost a decade. So him with that coming back, I mean, it makes it an even tougher choice to bring him back, or to get rid of him, I should say. And I believe it was the day Punk came back at Survivor Series with WWE, or it was the day after, Danielson released a tweet kind of showing that hard decision making, where he said, "My dad always told me the right thing is often the hardest thing to do. It won't always make the most money. It won't always be the most popular, but it's still the right thing. Hashtag AEW with the heart emoji." So it just goes to show. And I think a lot of people were taking this different ways, and he was getting a lot of pushback from fans for this tweet. And they were, comparing how this related to Punk debuting in WWE and all of that sort of thing. But for me, like, that says a lot, man. And that's very, very true. Like, they know making that decision to cut this guy, they're going to take a hit financially, in the eyes of the fans. A lot of people are going to say it was the wrong move. It was, you should have just bit down and made it work. And fans can have their opinion from 60,000 feet, looking at this situation. But the people that really saw the impact of that situation were the people in the locker room, and if they're going to, that's what fans, when you hitch your wagon to Team Punk, or you hitch your wagon to Team Young Bucks, Team Kenny Omega, you're kind of being very, very short-sighted. And we all have done it across all of our shows on the Tavern. We've had our opinions, but we are vastly undereducated when it comes to what was really going down. We don't know what the air in the room felt like. So when a Danielson has to make this decision, you gotta think that they are weighing they're taking the money hit. They are weighing they're taking the negativity of the fans. But for the greater good, like he said in that tweet, it just goes to show you, like, man, our locker room culture, you always hear about that in sports. Like, a team's culture is very important to the success of the team. And when a team is gelling and clicking, and it shows on the field, and I think it's the same in wrestling. When a locker room is gelling and clicking, it doesn't matter what your talent level is in that locker room. You can rise above what you can offer from a talent perspective. I think TNA Impact shows that a lot, that I think their locker room is so gelling that they're putting on some of the best quality they do because it's such a good locker room culture. And I think that's really a big part of what played into this decision. It's like, yeah, man, it's a hard decision. We might lose some money. We might lose some fanfare from, the IWC, but in the long run, this is what's important.
Yeah, it was a crossroads definitely for the company to make a decision about what the identity would be, because of course it's somewhere. And I think going back to the tweet, Bryan Danielson had said that was what he had said in the locker room. So I don't think he confirmed it, but Talent did confirm that we're in the room, that when they did that team meeting talking about Punk being let go from the company, those are the words they said. And I think that was confirmed by people there. And man, from the heart, like, I know he has the heart emoji in it, but it's truly from the heart.
Yeah.
You could tell that he cares about not only the current product of what it looks like on screen now, but he wants it to be something that's a legacy for pro wrestling, that 15, 20 years from now, when he's not an active competitor. I know he says he has 3 years left. I'll give him 5 to 10 to see what happens. But I think that's a big piece of what he's looking at. He's seeing bigger picture. What will AEW be as they develop this history and this roster, and being an alternative and moving towards the direction of where it was always moving, towards this wrestling utopia type of product for the wrestling fans, not just sports entertainment.
Yeah, and not to put Punk's career out to pasture or anything, but the truth of the matter is, it's like time moves fast in pro wrestling. 1 week we're all hot about one thing, and then another big piece of news happens and we move on, and that becomes a distant memory in the story of pro wrestling. And this is the same thing, man. Like, think of it, AEW is coming up on its, I believe, 5 years. Will be this coming Double or Nothing will be 5 years since their first event. January will be 5 years from the day they announced the company's existence. So this is a company that's only knocking on the door of 5 years. And it seems, I remember being at Double or Nothing in 2019. It seems like it was just yesterday. So a blink and you miss it, dude. This company will be a decade old. And
Right.
Punk will probably be at that point maybe making one-off appearances here and there. He's not going to be someone to count on week to week. So you can't make a decision that's going to hurt your company in the long run for a guy who's only going to be able to deliver for you for maybe 3 years at most, 3-4 years. Like, you have to see the long game in pro wrestling. It's the same thing in the NFL, man. Like, you have a team that's great, but if a star player who's selling all the jerseys and all the teams love him, like Terrell Owens back in the day.
Look at James Harden right now. How many teams has he burned
Exactly.
through? Like, let's look at him
Exactly,
through
dude.
a microscope like Punk.
Yeah, sometimes you have to cut bait with people for the greater good of the long run. And I think that's what this decision was. And in a perfect world, Punk gets to have his nice little ride off into the sunset in WWE. Hopefully that goes well. And then AEW can start to put this kind of black mark of their history behind them, because I think 10 years from now, we'll look back and this will just be one of those like growing pains that they had to battle through. I don't think the company's going anywhere, especially with Tony Khan really wanting to lean on Danielson and keep him in the fold even past his in-ring career.
So guys, stay tuned to the Dave's Rave segment. I have some financials in there that will quell a lot of the anxiety that AEW fans have about the company and how really steady the ground has become, but we'll get into that. You mentioned Danielson being part of the long-term future of AEW. So we know that he wants to finish up his career because he wants to go back and being a father. And that's a huge part of his life. He doesn't want to be on the road. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he wants to check off that list before he gets done with his in-ring career. But we had Tony Khan on the other end of things on The Athletic, which is a great subscription, by the way. Check it out if you like sports. And they also have great wrestling content.
Yeah, The Athletic's great.
He said when Danielson is no longer active with AEW, he will remain with AEW, quote, in spirit and make occasional sporadic appearances. So the quote from Tony here was, Brian and I made an agreement 3 years to the week before AEW All In 2024. The agreement was that Brian would wrestle full-time for 3 years. And even 3 years in advance of the expiration of the agreement, I was already clawing for him to stay. He will stay with us in spirit and sometimes occasionally make sporadic appearances with us. So he did mention he'll be full-time until pretty much the end of 2024. We know that he is a huge part of what they're doing creatively. We know that he started to really test those waters during Collision. With the more content, there needs more guidance, and Tony Khan can only put so much more on his plate. So the spillover went to Danielson. He obviously knocked out of the park, earning a lot of the trust of the big man himself here. But yeah, I mean, I love the quote here about them saying in spirit, because any promotion, especially for me, in spirit of the American Dragon, he's pro wrestling personified, and that's the image I want the company that I support to be in. And if Bryan Danielson has a say in it, you could trust it's at least going to come with a genuine emotion towards the love of pro wrestling. And I am very happy to hear that, because easily similar to a lot of guys that kind of the free agent market of the Monday Night Wars back in the day where they would jump promotions, I'm sure WWE would love to get their hands on Bryan Danielson again in something similar to this. Have him at the PC, teaching people how to wrestle, being a coach, being behind the scenes, maybe helping Shawn Michaels during NXT. I'm sure that that's been rattled around. The fact that there seems to be a mutual understanding that Tony Khan values him and then Bryan Danielson feels heard seems to be a union that's going to continue for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, the in spirit thing, I think he taps into the spirit of what AEW was initially born out of. And I think that's really important. It's been said in the past, Bryan Danielson has said it, Tony Khan has said it, that they share a very parallel, similar vision of what pro wrestling should be. And it definitely makes me feel better about this company that there's a guy like him that has Tony's trust, that Tony can lean on. And I really hope, I've said in the past that Chris Jericho, I would love to see Jericho kind of step into that Pat Patterson role for Tony. And I think he is one of those guys. I think Tony has three guys that he kind of leans on. And I think they all give him different elements of what makes AEW great. I think Chris Jericho kind of brings in that storytelling, sports entertainment side to Tony. I think Jon Moxley's one of those guys he leans on, and I think that's the attitude, the piss and vinegar, the let's push the limits, Tony. And I think Danielson is that pure wrestling, logical, let's build this thing. Let's make this a place that's good for pro wrestlers. And I would love that in spirit part of Tony's quote to really be, even if he can't be there week to week, because we know Danielson wants to be there for his kids and raise his children and be a present father, even if he's just a phone call away, man, if he's a guy that Tony can lean on and really help build this company, I think Danielson knows that too, is that he would be a wealth of knowledge for WWE, training at the PC, anything behind the scenes that he could do there. But in my opinion, Danielson brings a lot more to offer for a company like AEW. I think they need people like him more than WWE does. WWE is a machine. Sure, it would benefit them, and they have a ton of phenomenal people behind the scene that make that machine run. People like Shawn Michaels, who's done a bang-up job getting NXT back to where it should be. And some of the faceless names that never get the credit. You know, some of those backstage producers, some of those trainers at the PC. But Danielson, you know, AEW needs to get those guys in their corner too. They need to have those guys behind the scenes. And I think Danielson's one of those. And just to go back to that tweet, he said, you know, about a lot of people were attaching it to the CM Punk firing. And this is what he told the talent when they had that locker room meeting about this. But if you drill down a little deeper in this tweet too, I think this tweet has a parallel meaning here. I think the tweet is kind of relating on the decision of firing Punk, but I also believe this tweet is maybe even kind of a veiled take on his decision to hitch his wagon to AEW. You know, the right thing is often the hardest thing to do. It won't always make the most money. It won't always be the most popular, but it's still the right thing. I see that as his decision to come to AEW as well. He probably could have made more money in WWE. He probably would have made a lot more fans, that WWE universe, happy by signing. But he felt it was the right thing to do to come to this company, give a true alternative where wrestlers can come and make money. That's what people forget when they want to bury AEW and hope that this company goes away and tear them down at every cost. It's like, guys, the wrestlers that you love in WWE that are going to be WWE lifers, even they benefit from this company's existence, because when their contracts come up, it means more money for all the guys you love. Like the fact that Punk can go to WWE, that may not have happened if AEW didn't exist. The fact that, you know, Drew McIntyre might get a monster payday, the fact that TKO and WWE have made a directive right now of trying to sign guys to long-term deals, that might not be happening if not for another company waiting in the wings to kind of snipe some of your big talent away. This company being there is good for your favorite pro wrestlers because it's getting more money in their payday. And if you're not just a corporate shill and you're following 3 letters and hitching your wagon to them, if you're a fan of the pro wrestlers who entertain us in the ring, TNA, New Japan, AEW, WWE, all of them are important to the success of our pro wrestlers that we love because it means they get way more money and they get paid the way they should be.
It's an ecosystem that needs to be fed. And I think there needs to be, like you said, I know it's cliche, but the wrestling is a buffet thing really resonates with me.
Yes.
And the butterfly effect of if, say this goes differently and Tony Khan decides to forgive everything that happened with Punk and keep him here, who's to say that if you don't give the leadership to a guy like Bryan Danielson to right the ship and Tony Khan is an all-seeing power, he's going to be the guy that makes the decisions and he decides for better or for worse, Punk's our guy. How many other guys are walking out that maybe don't publicly, not even just have a disdain for Punk, but maybe just where the company was moving, just the animosity that just existed on both shows, people being not allowed on Collision and people not allowed on Dynamite. And it's a two-way street 100%. But I think this will go down as one of the more important decisions in the history of this company. Twofold. Bryan Danielson being given power and incentivize him staying and making him feel heard and valued. And also making the decision to cut ties with CM Punk and dealing with the worst case scenario on their end. Tony Khan's sleepless nights of CM Punk showing up at Survivor Series. That was worst case scenario. It already happened. Pull the Band-Aid off and let's get to work and continue to churn out really good, good product. And at this point, I think they're moving forward. We got the MJF promo that definitely felt like it could have been targeted towards Punk, but everything else has been, let's do what we do best. Let's put on these awesome matches during these Continental Classic. And that's the AEW I love. good for wrestling that this exists in a way where you can get your fill elsewhere. And for those that maybe weren't tuning into WWE for a weekly basis and they just like kind of peripherally check it out, those that tuned in for the 3-hour Raw and waited through that for Punk's promo just to be, in my opinion, disappointed by a listless attempt at a promo, because what else can you say? The NDA that has Punk in a stranglehold where he can't really fire off the pipe bombs in a culture that has already changed. Like, we already have wrestlers that he was, I guess, trying to get in the favor of the fan base. It was toothless. But I'm just saying, if you sat there and watched Raw for 3 hours, that's what it used to be. Like, that's what it used to be, where that was wrestling. And even the WWE Punk, side of things feel like that is actually, I mean, how could you watch that 3-hour Raw and be entertained? It was just, it's too much. It's propaganda commercial, and there's some good stuff in it, of course, but no one can sit through 3 hours and say that is like how a good use of your Monday night. I'm sorry. It just is not a good product.
No, it's a rough 3 hours. And like you said, any wrestling company is going to have the good stuff that you love and the stuff that you're not into. Every company, from AEW, WWE, TNA, there's those things that you're like, man, that was awesome. That wasn't necessarily for me. We've heard it said a ton of times, like, not every segment is going to be for you. There might be a segment that's more for the kids. There might be a segment that's more for the girls, the guys, whatever. But man, that 3 hours of Raw, especially you're waiting for the Punk thing. And
dude, it's a slog through mud. It used to remind me of back when I was a kid and they would put a news cycle on, at the 10 p.m. hour or 11 p.m. hour, we're going to have a wrestler interview. So you'd tune into the news, ABC or whatever, or Fox News. And they would wait and wait and wait to give it to you. So you hang on, you're checking out the other news stories. And then it would be this fruitless 5-minute fluff piece. Yeah. And it's just like, why did I sit through watching this? It's not going to make me want to tune into the rest of the news. And I think, going back to Raw for a second, like, there's no flow to the show. And I think SmackDown is a better example of what 2 hours can be, because a lot of times they're guilty of the same thing, but they don't use it as a vehicle to entertain you on a weekly basis. They use it as a vehicle to get you ready for whatever they're trying to garner towards with these big events. And like I said, man, like, if 3 hours of Raw is for you, great, enjoy it. But for me, wrestling on a Wednesday night, even Tuesday night with NXT, is more geared towards what I enjoy.
Same.
And then sitting and watching, what we got with the Punk promo, like, was it worth it? And that's the most of what people are saying. Like, yeah, there was a huge pomp and circumstance for the return, but man, that promo had no teeth. And I know we're moving in a different direction, but there needs to be a world where two different products exist, and that's okay. It's for everybody to enjoy.
Absolutely, man. And I think for a lot of young people, my kids included, they haven't really, wrestling is dad's thing in my house. I don't have little kids that like pro wrestling. Charlie, she'll tune in, but they are definitely more oogly-eyed towards a WWE product.
Of course,
They're 4 and 5 years old, 9 years old. It's tailored to that. Now, that's fine. It was a gateway drug for me, dude. I looked at the screen. I saw a big guy in red and yellow screaming at the TV. I'm like, hey, this guy's mine. And that got me into pro wrestling. But AEW is definitely, right now, for me, I think they're hitting a really sweet spot with this Continental Classic, because they're giving you the pure wrestling aspect of it, which I love. But they're also doing some of the best kind of sports entertainment, over the top stories right now that I really enjoy too. So we're getting like you said, Ace, the buffet right now. We're getting a little bit of everything. They're featuring luchadors a lot. They're featuring a lot of good stuff. So it's more for me, but there's people out there that eat up WWE, and, more power to you, man. I love that it's there for you to enjoy. And I love that AEW is there for me to enjoy. So it's a good time to be a wrestling fan.
But also, and I think I'm always a glass half full type of guy, silver lining, looking at the chaos that came out of this situation, ultimately with this situation that AEW is put in a bad light when Punk showed up PR wise. And, social media, if you look at any Tony Khan's tweets or AEW's tweets, there's Punk mentions and having to weather that storm. What the silver lining of that is the negativity storm can't get any larger. So it feels like they're more in tune to, let's just stick to who we are and put our head down and ignore all the negativity and go towards the goal, which is the Continental Classic. You mentioned the sports entertainment, building the characters. And I think that almost like was a cataclysmic event to right the ship in a lot of ways, where now they're just, to me, it feels like the AEW of old. And we've been watching weekly since it's in the first ever episode of Dynamite. And I think now we're seeing, to me, more in line with the culture and the feeling that Wednesday nights used to have. It's 100%. Returning. 100%. Go back to a year ago from this point, Dynamite didn't really feel like they were still kind of searching for their footing. I wouldn't say they're trying to be WWE light, but there was this like, it felt different. And of course, companies grow and it's ebbs and flows and all that. But it feels to me, the feeling of AEW has returned, which is important because people remember AEW was built on a feeling of the fans. And I think that, to encapsulate that in a moment again is important. And let's get back to that feeling and enjoying pro wrestling for what it is on the screen. Yeah,
it's definitely recaptured that pandemic era AEW that I love. Like, it's back. I can feel it. Like, I can feel the excitement. They have intriguing things going on. They're building their correct young stars, and they kind of did go WWE light. A year ago, it felt a little like there was a lot of just meaningless stuff. And now, week to week, it seems like every segment is building upon a story that we're all invested in. So I think they've, like you said, it took a big kind of black mark to right the ship. And, when we look back, I just think the Punk thing, I know they're getting a lot of heat from it, from the fans, but I also love that they're putting it behind them, but they're not burying their history. We saw that in MJF's promo where he mentioned Cody Rhodes. He mentioned CM Punk. Like, those guys were here. They were a part of what we did. We're not going to shy away from that with our on-screen product. We're not going to tuck our head in the sand and act like it never happened. So I appreciate that too. I like when companies treat me like a smart fan and don't try and like manipulate the narrative.
So before we move on to big story number 2, just want to thank everyone for dealing with my voice right now. I did have a little bit of a crack there, but Rad Pro Wrestling, I gave it my all in the main event. Congrats to Rod Slab, aka Bobby Orlando, for being the first Rad Pro Wrestling champion. So if you heard a little bit of on your end my voice cracking, I apologize. But thanks for dealing with that. That is the life of a ring announcer on the independent scene.
Yeah.
So. Well, let's get to big story number 2.
Big story 2.
We have RIC Flair in the news here. We got some backlash from a promo that was unaired on AEW Rampage this past Friday. So, angling this story from RIC Flair's perspective, he announced that he will, quote, walk away from AEW if he's embarrassing the company. So, this social media post was dropped here on Twitter and also on Instagram. You can see it in front of you guys if you're watching on video. He had said, "I am so tired of hearing all this negativity. I don't need to work and I don't need the money. Can I simply enjoy being by my dear friend at Sting's side for the next few months without so much hatred? I know I'm old, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy life. I have earned the right to do whatever I want, and I'm exactly where I want to be. I appreciate everything, Tony Khan, but I'm more than willing to walk away if I am embarrassing you and your company. All I can say is I'm sorry." So this was based on a promo where, if you are a pro wrestling fan, WCW, NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, RIC Flair has a bag of tricks of promos that he brings out. And the one he brought out was 18 to 28-year-olds come to my hotel room without your boyfriends after the show. And for a wrestling fan, for a lifelong wrestling fan, hearing that, it washes over me. That's the Nature Boy, brother. Like, that's what you hear. That's the limousine riding, jet flying. That's
Allen Profile, baby.
That is the gimmick of RIC Flair. And I think what we have seen throughout history, that the gimmick has blurred into his real life and all that. And I think that's where people get stuck on it.
Yeah.
But really, to me, and I guess the social media backlash and chatter from the line he delivered in the in-ring promo was, again, it's historical reference. And I think RIC Flair, in droves, and of course we'll talk about all the talent that came out, past and present, about RIC Flair and his contributions to wrestling. I understand in a vacuum, if you hear that from RIC Flair, especially with the allegations of the past, you could feel a certain type of way, but that's not taking in the full picture. This is Ric Flair, the character, saying something Ric Flair, the character, would say. That's like getting mad at MJF for talking about pinning shoulders to mats and banging rats. Like that's not Maxwell Jacob Friedman in his real life, and no one blinked an eye at that. So it's a wrestling universe that's been created. This has always been Ric Flair. Pull up a clip from an NWA studio interview with Tony Schiavone by his side. He's saying that exact quote. And maybe it doesn't age well in 2023, but Ric Flair is here. Let's keep Ric Flair true to form and not filter him down. He didn't say anything that was out of a Ric Flair normal promo.
Right. And guys, he's 74. Do you really think this guy's getting 18 and 28-year-olds at his like, come on, guys, like settle down. This new very sensitive culture in the modern wrestling fan, just because it offends you doesn't mean it shouldn't be on our screens for other fans. Like you said, this is for the old school, man. This is for the guy. Oh, that's Rick. NWA Jim Crockett Promotions. If you pull up any of his old promos where he was standing in front of the podium with Tony Schiavone, and he's cutting very similar promos, probably worse. And what are they doing? They're cutting to the faces of the young women in the crowd, and they're totally just encapsulated with this man. And that was his character. Very similar to Rick Rude. Go back and look Rick Rude promos up. He was saying very similar things. This was his gimmick, like you said, Ace. I think this catches a lot of heat with the really sensitive modern fan who, you know, I'm offended. This shouldn't be on my screen. He is a whatever expletive you want to throw at Ric Flair and the allegations. This all is kind of building off of that Dark Side of the Ring episode, which people, I'm a film school guy. I went to film school. I know how you can take a narrative and push it a certain way. This is people latching onto that Dark Side of the Ring episode and saying, this is what happened. This is the standard of what happened. There's many stories. There's many ways to edit and make things look a certain way. I'm not saying what he did was right on the plane ride from hell. I'm not saying what they said he did happened or didn't happen. I'm just saying, like, you have to look at both sides of the story. Just because an editor, a filmmaker, and I love Evan Husney and those guys at Dark Side of the Ring. I think they've done a lot for pro wrestling to get wrestling out there to people that may not watch. But I do think a lot of people from that episode came out and said it was a bit of a hit piece. Like they weren't telling the whole side of the story. They weren't showing you both sides. They were leaning on certain things that did happen and what didn't happen. And so I don't know, man. I look at Ric Flair and he says something like this. I don't take any sort of offense to this. And even if I did, I'm not saying you don't have a right to be offended. What I'm saying is, if this type of stuff makes you mad, it's just not for you. He's not furthering some seedy disposition that this company is going to get behind, and they're pushing toxic masculinity, or they're pushing sexual deviance from a man. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is, I don't like it when people, a certain sect of people, it happens in stand-up comedy too, and it really bothers me, where one person's offense or a group of people's offense is deemed to be the gold standard of morality, and that no one else, I don't care if you like it, it shouldn't be there. Well, I grew up in a generation where if you don't like something, if you're listening to a radio person that you don't like, or if you're watching a show that you don't like, or someone and it doesn't click with you, it offends you or whatever, you just don't give your support to that. And that's fine. But don't try and make it seem like this shouldn't be out there. I don't think anything he said was over the line. I don't think anything he said was in bad taste. It's character work. It's building off of a history of this character that was there in the 70s, man. It's been there forever. And yeah, maybe it doesn't fit with the social norms of today. And that's fine if it's not your cup of tea. But to bury him and say, this shouldn't be here, this company is supporting someone they shouldn't, I completely push back against that. I don't think anything he said was this just drastically horrible thing. Now there's things people could say that I would be like, yeah, that's wrong. I didn't see that in this. I saw a very vocal minority coming out and getting loud on X, which is par for the course in any walk of life. You go in there, you look at pro wrestling, you look at NFL news, you look at movie news, Star Wars people burying Star Wars nerds. You go to politics, it's a shit show. People think that X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is the voice of the populace. You're dead wrong. I don't know many people that use that app. The people that use that app traditionally are in a fairly small microcosm of society. If you walk out on your street, if you went by the voices you hear on X, you would think you'd walk out your door and people would be at each other's throats. I have a job where I'm walking amongst the public all day. I'm talking to every shape of person, every creed, every sexuality, everything. And everyone's, for the most part, everyone's getting along. Everyone's happy to see you. That's the thing with social media. It breeds this discontent in America. But most times, if you walk out in your small town and you shake hands and go talk to people, it's not as bad as what it seems to be on social media. And I think things like this make it seem like the wrestling world is worse than it is. If you go to a wrestling show, most of the time, you'll have your outliers, but most of the time, everybody's getting along, man. You're meeting fans, you're having a good time, you're all there for pro wrestling. Yeah, this thing might hit harder with you than it hits with the other person, but we're all a part of a big happy family, a big dysfunctional family of pro wrestling fans. But if you lean onto X, you think like, man, everybody hates each other. It's not true. Don't buy into the social media hype of dissension amongst people in all walks of life, not just pro wrestling. So when I hear like this vocal minority come out and try and bury Ric Flair and send him out to pasture and all this, I just push back on that because I don't think it's the case. I don't think what he did was wrong. I stand by that. And I think people need to get a little bit thicker skin. And just, if you don't like it, don't tune in, keep it moving, go about your day. And I think it shows by a lot of the people that stepped up and supported Rick in wake of this.
Yeah, you mentioned the two guys in the comments that were most prominent, Steve Austin and Kevin Nash, chimed in the comments, and Austin posted right in the comments. This wasn't a private text message. This was on Front Street for everybody to see. Steve Austin said, "Rick, I enjoy watching. You do all the things you do, and you're always having fun. Keep doing you, and that's the bottom line." Kevin Nash followed up with, "Besides the fact you have earned the right, you wouldn't be there if it wasn't drawing fans. You always bring a smile on my face. Go Michigan." So, again, these guys are in line. I mean, they're more in tune with, two of the best to ever do it, commenting on probably the GOAT to do it, the Babe Ruth of wrestling. This is a conversation happening amongst them. And I think the initial signing of Ric Flair, I can understand if there was a pushback similar to this from the jump, but there wasn't. And maybe in small circles there was, and everyone was kind of looking past, and everyone, the wave of the negativity that came from Dark Side of the Ring seems to have dissipated, similar to the Hulk Hogan stuff where like it just passes in time and you kind of have to wait and see. My only thing on this would be, I felt like AEW and Ric Flair gave it more life than it even deserved to have. I think the fact that Rick even apologized on Instagram, I felt like he maybe needed to. But I think by doing that, you're giving them even further a voice. I would have just left the promo on Rampage. It is what it is. It's pro wrestling. And again, it's Ric Flair's character. Again, we've heard, I mentioned the MJF stuff, but that is one example in a sea of many of a lot of people, the ham and eggers out there, are going to be upset by something you say on a wrestling program. And Ric Flair, this is the nature boy character. And if this is the run that's happening, pairing with Sting on his final run, Both of these legends deserve to have an authenticity to the characters. You brought them back here. It's like having Richard Pryor do stand-up and asking him to cut some things out. I'm sorry. These guys are in the fold here for a reason, and fans are tuning in, young and old, to see Ric Flair. Whether people like him or not, there is a sect of fans, 2 of them sitting right here, that respect his body of work and what wrestling is because of what he's contributed. So, you know, I think it speaks volumes that Steve Austin and Kevin Nash spoke out. Their voices mean way more than any of us do because they're in it. They understand the importance of it. And Ric Flair deserves the reverence. I don't think, again, we went back to when he first signed, one of the big stories. No, I think because of the overexposure of the rap videos, the weed strain, the commercials, people kind of lose sight of how important he is to pro wrestling. And having him here, let's not push him out the door. He's important for AEW. And really, it's important for Sting on this final run. Let's give Sting what he wants, because these 2 guys are finishing up their career with the 3 letters AEW, not WWE. You know, they have a place to kind of tell their story. And let's not get too dramatic about something that he's been saying since 1983. And like I said, NWA studio with Tony Schiavone. You know, in a lot of ways, the promo was watered down. If you go back and watch some of those old WWE Network promos,
totally watered
he was
down.
being a little bit more direct about what he wanted to be done in those hotel rooms, and not just the innuendo. Like, we can't even do the innuendo anymore.
Yeah, this was an Easter egg for old school fans. That's all it was. It was like, oh, there's the old Rick. And that's all it was, man. And I'm totally biased here because I think Ric Flair is the greatest pro wrestler to ever live. He's been my number one. He was the guy as a kid when I was a little stinger and my uncles were talking about how cool Rick was and how much of a just pansy Sting was. And I would argue with them. He was the bane of my existence when I was 8 and 9 years old. But now, you know, as I got older, I saw the brilliance of what this man did. And I think people lose sight of that. There's a big oversensitivity. And the thing that really bummed me out, I'm 100% behind what you're saying, Ace, with like this. If they just released this and kept it moving, this would have been a blip and you miss it. There would have been a little bit of smattering of people that didn't like it, but it wouldn't have caught wind. I hate the fact that Rick felt the need to make this post about it, because once he posted about it, that's when it grew legs. I mean, the promo hadn't even came out yet. And he was already, and we didn't even know what he was talking about. The people that didn't read the spoilers for Rampage. And Rick, as you get older, you get more sensitive, you get more. Rick's always been a bit of a bleeding heart.
And he's self-conscious too. Let's not forget that. He had to build the ego back after WCW really humbled him.
100%. He's very self-conscious. We've heard the stories about, you know, he lost his confidence in WWE and Triple H brought him into the Evolution to build him back up. Like, hey man, you're Ric Flair, because he had lost that confidence. And I think in his old age, he's 74. He's looking around at all these strapping wrestlers around him. And he's like, man, that used to be me. And now I'm here in the twilight of my life. So there is that lack of confidence. And that's what Austin and Kevin Nash, I think, were responding to. They know how Rick is, and they're like, Rick, don't let him get to you. Do you, man? We still like watching what you do. That's who it's for, is that generation. And if you want to say, well, Austin and Kevin Nash they have the mentality that he does. Of course they would stand up for him. You don't know Steve Austin and Kevin Nash, because if you look down the history of things they've supported, people they've came out against, Steve Austin, although he plays the Texas rattlesnake, you know, a redneck beer drinking guy, and Kevin Nash, a big hawking guy, they are very much a progressive, liberal leaning couple of dudes. Just, you can go down the history and find tons of interviews with them taking stances on certain topics where you're like, damn, I didn't realize they were like that. So for them to come out and say this, I think it says a lot of just them kind of building up Rick's thick skin and being like, Rick, don't let the people online make you feel a certain way. You're Rick. We love you for being Rick. Keep being Rick. And I love that those guys, his peers, stepped up and took up for him, because I can't stand a 20-something wrestling fan trying to whitewash what a man has done to the business because of this, that, and the other, based off of a 18 to 28, no boyfriends or husbands allowed. If that offends you, good God, man. Like, do you like stand-up comedy? I bet you're fun to party with. I bet you're great at parties if you're getting upset about that, because there's a lot more things in this world right now that need attention that are offensive, from a political standpoint, from a global, the things going on in the global arena right now that we need to be upset about and stand up to fight against. And this is not one of them.
Completely agree. And the thing with Ric Flair, again, want to reiterate just the legacy. He's given his body to this business, and I think he deserves the right to be here with his friend Sting. And it's poetic, man. Greensboro going out in style.
We got to go. We got to go, Ace. We got to get tickets, man.
It's going to be a fantastic night of wrestling, and let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here of honoring the history that gets sort of the narrative shifted in a WWE scope. We have this opportunity to tell Sting's story without the WWE machine kind of clouding that and making his importance seem less than significant. So let's get into big story number 3.
Big story 3.
Big story number 3, and this happened earlier in the week. It honestly felt like it wasn't going to be a big story, but then as we kind of continued to discuss this is growing legs. And AEW World Champion MJF has suffered a torn labrum, but Chad, he's not vacating his title. So on Monday, he underwent an MRI on his left shoulder. The MRI revealed that he has a torn labrum, but he avowed that he will still be making his scheduled AEW World Championship defense against Samoa Joe at World's End. So he did release a then deleted tweet that said, "I just got an MRI. I tore my labrum in my left shoulder. I'll be defending my title at World's End. I believe in AEW." So we also got confirmation in the newsletter about other injuries too from that match with Jay White. And he had said, this is Dave Meltzer, MJF legit suffered a dislocated hip in the match as well as aggravated a prior shoulder injury. The hip injury took place when he was planning to do the spot where you come off the top rope and fly far, ending with an elbow drop, putting your opponent through the table. However, when he put White on the table, it collapsed. Instead of ditching the spot, he felt the crowd was going to flatten if he didn't do the spot, climbed to the top rope and did the elbow from the top rope to the floor, which is an absolute killer on your hip. It was popped back in, but he was in terrible pain. The shoulder injury worsened from a top rope uranagi. Okay, so injury, he's banged up. The dude's been grinding, working a harder schedule than he's ever worked, kayfabe and otherwise. Like, the dude is actually going out there and putting on these classic matches. Everyone talks about Will Ospreay and his match of the year catalog, but MJF is right there with him, earning the credence of being one of the best workers in the world today. But really, the conversation piece is here. We know that he's going to work the match at World's End. He's going to need to rehab eventually. Not even just that he needs surgery, because I think we've revealed at this point that the torn labrum doesn't need surgery. It can be healed in other ways. You can work through it. I think there was a conversation on the Wrestling Observer Radio where, I think Dave and Brian were talking about the injury of torn labrum and the misunderstanding of just how common it is. And not that it's any less painful, but it is a wear and tear injury that can heal on its own with just sort of like, don't be as active. This brings the conversation, Chad. Are we going to see a title change in December? And was that the original plan? Samoa Joe going to walk out of Long Island, New York with the AEW World Championship?
I mean, that's I do not want MJF to be injured. He's arguably my favorite modern wrestler working right now, especially with the young guys. I love seeing him on my weekly TV. I don't want to see him injured. Don't get me wrong. But I think this injury is great for this storyline, because now going into World's End, for the fans like us that are tapped into kind of the behind the scenes stuff, your mind instantly goes to, man, he's banged up. They could drop the title here to get it off of him because he's so hurt. I mean, the dude says, I don't know about the knee injury. I mean, in his promo, he even mentioned his knee. So I don't know if that's kayfabe, if that's legit, but we do know the shoulder is legit. We do know that the hip is legit. And he even floated that knee. So if he's got 3 injuries, maybe Tony Khan goes into World's Ends like, we got to put the title on Joe, which makes that story all the more compelling. I believe I think he keeps it. I think he totally keeps the title. I think they have a big plan in store. At first, I was when I think you had sent the initial text in the group chat about this injury, and I was like, shit, man, this is gonna throw a wrench into the flow of the story. They're gonna take it off of him, which bums me out because you can tell they're laying this long-term story out. And if they took the title off of him, what's that do to the bigger plan? But then in that same segment, when he comes out and cuts that promo saying he's still going to wrestle at World's End, we have the Devil's Crew come out and jump him. Once I saw the Devil's Crew come out and jump him, I'm like, okay, they're staying the course. I just think this Devil storyline is the end game of him losing this title. It builds the allure of MJF as a champion that he's going to go in this banged up and still keep that title with an absolute killer like Joe. I think it just adds to the weight of this kid. In my opinion, he's on the best run in pro wrestling right now, as far as just bell to bell, working through injuries. You know, you could say Christian Cage is having one hell of a run too, just character wise. But as far as the total package, the stories being told week to week, the matches he's having, MJF is like putting on a pace right now that no one's keeping up with. I know Roman's on this legendary 3-4 year run as a champion, but that dude's never there. I mean, imagine if Roman in that 3 to 4 years was keeping pace from an in-ring standpoint with what MJF's done in the last year. It would be absolutely legendary.
Right.
This is a run we're seeing. It's the longest reigning champion in AEW. I mean, this run has matches like that Iron Man match with Danielson that people forget about. That was one of the, in my opinion, the best Iron Man match I've ever seen. So he's putting on these just banger after banger matches. This is something when you look back at the history of AEW, it's gonna be like, man, remember that initial MJF title run? That was classic. I don't think they take it off of him. I think they'll find unique ways to keep him. They might pull back on his in-ring a little bit, but I mean, is he going to be at ROH Final Battle to defend those tag titles? Like, that's another question. Like, is he going to be there to wrestle that? Are they going to shelve him until World's End? Like, these are all questions to keep track of, but I'm cautiously optimistic that this doesn't present a bigger problem. They have to be smart about this though, because if they work him a little too hard, we could get to World's End and there could be a booking change. You know, they could possibly have to take it off. We don't know the severity of it. We're just getting secondhand knowledge from, you know, the Meltzers of the world, but we're not in that closed room meeting between Tony Khan and MJF where MJF's like, hey man, look at this X-ray. I don't know if I can go. You know, that is on the table, which makes it all the more intriguing going into World's End. It's like, I cannot wait to see how they handle this December 30th.
I honestly, when they announced this match, even before the injury, I had a hard time believing that they would beat Joe twice in such a short period of time. That was the big thing to me. And now with the injury out there, I do think Joe is going to be the champion. And I think this extends the story with MJF and Adam Cole way longer. I mean, you had the circumstance with Adam Cole, his ankle injury, and then base that with this MJF injury. There is a world where you can have Joe have a run with the championship. And I think they almost like alluded to it during that MJF promo, saying he never got a chance to be the world champion in WWE and he deserved it. Now looking at it through this lens, like what other opportunity? Like it feels like we missed the boat with Bryan Danielson. He's never going to get a chance to hold the championship belt. This feels like a moment in time to capitalize, and it's a circumstantial thing at this point. But having Joe have a, you know, maybe even like a 4-month run while these guys heal up, and then you kind of pay off in the summer or early spring of MJF and Adam Cole and get the title back on MJF and then revisit. Why not, man? I think, especially if you're going to just the smoke and mirrors piece, we were, you know, just talking about Roman Reigns, and everyone's been critical of how few and far between his title defenses have been. I think if MJF really needs time to heal up, and well deserved, the dude has been grinding that axe on both sides of the field, man, and he's just absolutely, like, he's beat up right now. And I think if you are going to have to like put all these safeguards in place and you can't work till World's End, and maybe you have to find a way to protect him, deservedly so, before whatever big event you get with Adam Cole. Why don't we just kind of put a bookmark in the story, close the book for a second, continue to tell the devil story out where maybe the devil plays a role in MJF losing the title here. Samoa Joe goes on this dominant run and just put on these like classic matches and give Joe that resume building moment. It is prestigious for the championship to have someone like Joe with his legacy attached to that title. And I think we've moved past the fact that MJF already is the longest reigning champion in history. So that benchmark has been checked. It's okay. You could take the title off of him and then pivot. Some of the best stories happen in real time, and the creativity that happens on that end to have to adapt to changes. We saw they adapted well with the Adam Cole stuff. And in my opinion, it's emphasized the Kingdom. It's emphasized Adam Cole with the injury. They probably would do the same thing with MJF. He'd stay on our screen. He just can't work at the same level he is. Might as well put the title on Joe for a little bit, and it builds more sympathy towards the devil. And I think that's the devil being MJF, not the devil group, but it is a big piece of what they could be doing.
No, you're right, man. When they were really playing up like Joe never got an opportunity to hold the world title in WWE, when they said that line, I'm like, oh shit. That seems like a foreshadowing. Even if it's not this time, like I feel like Joe's going to get something in this company. And they've really heated him up, man. I love the way they're presenting Joe now. When he first came in, I was like, man, get him off of ROH. I want to see him week to week because I'm a big Joe fan. You're right. He could totally end up, even if it's just a run from World's End to Revolution.
Right.
You know, even that would even be worth it. And it would be totally justified because they've never done a short title reign. Never. Every person who's held that title has held it. I think the shortest reign was Jericho, and that was, I want to say 6 to 9 months in that window. So I don't think they can have MJF beat him clean a second time. I think that's why they're heating up the devil stuff even more, because I think the devil is going to play a part in Joe losing this match. And I think it's a way they can add a little gaga into the match and keep MJF from really having to pull out a 30-minute just barn burner physical wrestling match. So I'm still leaning MJF retains and the devil costs Joe, because if you look at the devil and the way the devil has done their deeds, you know what they do. They jumped Jay White. That was the person vying for that title. They came after Joe. I think they want to win that belt from MJF. They don't want anyone else winning. That's what the story seems to be right now. But again, if MJF's more hurt than we think he is, that all could be thrown out the window. All I'm hoping for is that whatever their plan is, whatever the long-term plan is that they have in their back pocket, I hope this injury doesn't send us off the rails of that. I hope we stay on course to whatever the ultimate goal is, because this storyline has already had to, I think, do a little bit of an about face with Adam Cole's injury. And I think they've really done it as best they can with keeping the story rolling with Adam Cole not being on our TVs every week. If they have to throw another wrench, another derailment in there with taking the title off of MJF too soon due to injury, you can only have so many derailments in a storyline before it starts to take a toll on it. So that's where I worry. I just hope the injury doesn't hurt the destination that they have in mind.
And also, I'm not that we're eulogizing MJF's title reign just yet, but really the edict probably released is to reestablish this as an important championship, because you mentioned the chaos that happened in the in-between with Punk's 2 reigns and one being less than a day and being stripped of the title, and then Moxley having to right the ship, not getting to go on his fly fishing vacation that he wanted to go on. But we now sit here and I feel like the title is as important as ever. Over a year has passed. MJF has taken that title to a new height, added to the list, and I think that job is done. MJF can go and rest for a bit, and then you kind of have to deal with the real life circumstances of, if it's not meant to be as far as in ring, you want that match to tell a story. You want it to to really resonate the same way that the original All In main event had that feeling with Adam Cole and MJF. And if it can't be there and you have to figure out a way to structure it and protect both guys because they're hurt and it's just the timing's not right, I'd rather them figure out a creative way to keep it going and then pay it off, like you mentioned, maybe at Double or Nothing. That's their biggest event.
I mean,
maybe
they've got All In too. They've got All In.
If they could extend it from All In to All In, that would be fantastic. And then that might be a silver lining of this situation that the injuries provided.
Yeah.
But let's get to the quick hitters. But before we do that, let's give our update on the Continental Classic.
Continental Classic, baby.
So the tournament continued on Collision on Saturday with Blue League matches. So after being gone for over a month, we talked about Bryan Danielson in our big story number 1, but this was another big piece of his legacy that's being cemented here in AEW. He's only been gone about a month, maybe a little bit less than a month, with an orbital bone injury. Bryan Danielson returned to action, defeating Eddie Kingston with a running knee. He earned 3 points. Other matches in the tournament had Brody King defeating Claudio with a lariat to earn 3 more points. I'd like how first of all, Brody King being cemented as a big bad in this tournament, but also keeping Claudio strong because I think Nigel was the one that was saying it about, or maybe it was Kevin Kelly, about the cast hitting Claudio in the face. What were your thoughts on the way that was booked?
I liked it because I think the way they're booking this match is, or I should say the way they're booking Brody King, I love, because they're giving him big wins. I mean, he beat Eddie and now he beat Claudio, which is a big step up from Eddie. Not to hate on Eddie. I love Eddie, but just from an in-ring standpoint. And they did the cast thing. Commentary was kind of riding that to give a little bit of to keep Claudio strong in the tournament. But I love the fact that they're building up Brody King right now with 6 points, which makes there's going to be a moment where he goes against someone and someone beats him. And it's going to be all the more important in this classic tournament because this dude's rolling right now. He's undefeated and he's a big guy. He's dominant. They're not booking him weak. I would have a problem if Brody had a loss right now. The fact that they're making him seem like a Vader, a Bam Bam, I'm loving it, man. What'd you think of it?
I loved it as well. I had to say I was very surprised that Brody won. I've been surprised with the booking in the best way possible with the way they've been presenting some of these guys. I thought it'd be, maybe it's just the indoctrination to the WWE mindset of 50-50 booking where you would have it just seems like he would lose this match and Jay Lethal's not going to go 0-2 and Daniel Garcia has to have a win by now, right? And no, that's not the case. It feels like a sporting event where anything can happen, and Brody King is on a roll right now. The format of this tournament seems to favor in kayfabe his character and just having the big strong guy run through a war of attrition as this is, and I think he's just going to bang people up. And I like to see him have a run here. Maybe he goes 4-0 to start, and I think that might be something really cool to see. And then maybe he doesn't win, but that's the story right there, that somehow someone overcame the monster that became Brody King. And then the fallout, dude, after this, Brody King's going to hopefully take the momentum from this and be looked at in a different light. He's not just 1/3 of a trio.
Right.
He is this guy you could heat, and we've been saying it here on the Tavern for how long? I think at this point you could heat up Brody King and say, you want a big bad for eventually Samoa Joe or Adam Cole when he wins the title, down the line. You want a formidable force to just heat up at a pay-per-view and believe that this guy could take the title. Man, he's getting to that point.
Yeah, he's definitely getting to that point. And I think 3 of the more interesting, there's 4 interesting storylines. There's a lot more, but 4 I want to kind of focus on is Brody King, undefeated right now in the Classic. And then you've got Jon Moxley undefeated, which I think they're kind of booking as he's the favorite. He's the Tom Brady, New England Patriots. Nobody can beat him. They're making you think he's a favorite. And I think I don't think he's going to go to the finals. I think Mox is going to get upset by someone. I love the fact that Eddie and Daniel Garcia are playing the underdog where they can't get the win. I think one of those guys is going to make a final push and start putting some wins together. And there's a part of me that thinks Garcia might get shut out in this tournament, and not from a, hey, you're here to take pins, but I think there's a bigger storyline at play where if Garcia has been struggling even before coming into this tournament, where if you shut him out, this is a great relaunch of his character to come out of the JAS. We saw Daddy Magic at commentary during his match being very disappointed. I think this is a way where he comes out of this a loser, and he comes out as a bona fide heel. I'm here. We've seen Callis flirting with that kid's money. I could see him he's down on his luck, and he goes under the wing of Callis. I have a theory that he could be replacing Sammy Guevara in the Don Callis family. That I could see some sort of situation there. And even the Mark Briscoe thing, I think, is fun. Like, Briscoe's taken 2 pins, but he cut a hell of a promo afterwards where if you think he's down and out, he's coming. He's going to make life hard on whoever he has remaining in the Classic. So there's a lot of good stuff. And quietly, Swerve Strickland is just putting on incredible matches, taking strong wins. I still think World's End, we're seeing Danielson and Swerve for the Classic. That's my gut reaction to it. But that's the beauty of how they're booking it. So many people like Jay White and Mox and Danielson. There's a lot of. I even like Andrade picking up a big win. That was huge. I did not want Garcia to beat him. They need to heat Andrade up. They're presenting him with CJ Perry, which I enjoy. So there's a lot being accomplished here. I know it's a straight up classic wrestling tournament, but I do think they're planting seeds with all of these guys and like, okay, what's after the Classic for these guys? And I think it's a good way to set each person up for what's next.
So you mentioned before that Daniel Garcia is winless and that a match with Andrade happened on Collision. So that was the other Blue League match that happened where Andrade earned 3 points. We had the announcement on Collision with more Blue League matches taking place. Bryan Danielson will take on Andrade El Idolo, and Eddie Kingston will take on Claudio. We know the history between Kingston and Claudio. Andrade and Bryan Danielson have mixed it up before, so it'll be cool to see them again. Updated standings, you mentioned them in passing, but the Gold League right now, top is Jon Moxley at 2-0-0 with 6 points. Swerve Strickland is also at 2-0-0 with 6 points, followed by Jay White, who is 1-1 with 3. Roosh also is 1-1 with 3. And then we have Jay Lethal and Mark Briscoe being the caboose on the train, being 0-2, no points. In the Blue League, Brody King leading the pack, 2-0-0. Bryan Danielson is 1-0-0 at 3 points. Andrade El Idolo is also 1-0-0 with 3 points. Claudio is 1-1 with 3 points. And Eddie Kingston, 0-2, bringing all his titles in. He's 0-2. And Daniel Garcia, as you mentioned, is winless. Man, I texted you last night. I got home late from Massachusetts, and I popped on Collision, which the DVR of the YouTube TV is fantastic. It's just so accessible. Love it. I recommend it to everybody. But
don't tell Brian Alvarez that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It did cut off the end of Collision. I'll be honest with you. It did actually cut off the end when they were still talking. So all I thought was Brian Alvarez. If you guys missed it, Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer had the ultimate marital dispute on Wrestling Observer Radio. I think it was Thursday, where they were arguing about DVR and being able to miss the ending. And
as soon as you texted me, like I had already listened to it, and I was like, "Yeah, dude, that was a classic argument."
And both of them, obviously, like a disgruntled married couple that has been together way too long. I think the two of them, it emerges there. But either way, I texted you that it felt like a big event, turning it on and seeing that the cold open with must have been like 6 promos in a row. Just
awesome.
Putting the importance on this tournament, man. I can't stay. I am a classic wrestling fan. So to have something bookending these shows and looking forward to and understanding, like even 3 weeks out, we know this is going to be a big piece of the story. We preview the weeks ahead and all that stuff. I love having a full card to just digest, get ready for, think about these really high quality matches that are coming. Every possibility of these matches between the Blue and Gold League, it's fascinating to me, and I can't wait to see it evolve over time. And man, this is the first year, and like imagine this 5 years in, where it just feels like holy shit, the legacy's now attached to not just the great work rate.
Man. That's what I love about it, is thinking about, you know, when we're 5-6 years deep and we're like, oh, remember when so-and-so won the 2026 Continental. this is the beginning of it. And hats off to the production team and Tony and how they're presenting it. Because a lot of times when you do a tournament, you'll throw all these rules out and it kind of becomes convoluted. It's hard to track the point system. They have done a bang up job showcasing the point structure. The graphic they put up is very clean and understandable, and you can follow along. And the beauty of it is we're early in the tournament. The points are really going to get interesting when we're in that final 2-week stretch. And okay, all this guy needs is a draw. All this guy needs, that's where it's going to get interesting. There's going to be a match in this tournament where the objective of one wrestler is to just take it to the time limit. You know what I mean? All I have to do is last. I don't need to win. All I have to do is take this to the time limit. There's so much intrigue that is going to come in to the final 2 weeks before World's End, when we're really tallying up those totals and being like, oh shit, if he gets this, he's going to. So I love how just digestible the scoring system is, how they've set it up. I think is genius. And I'm really enjoying it because there's intrigue that you don't get from just matches for the sake of matches. It seems important. And if they continue this, for years to come, this could be the premier tournament right there with G1. I mean, G1 is G1 because of the history of it and the amount of people that get involved and how long and grueling that tournament is. But the Continental Classic could become a 1B to G1's 1A. So I'm excited for the future of this tournament.
Yeah, and you're creating playoff atmosphere during one-off matches on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and maybe eventually Fridays if they start bringing it to Rampage and getting you to tune in there. It's very awesome because, like you mentioned before, you're creating circumstances that creates pressure without the need to put a championship match out there. In a lot of ways, more so than that, because championship matches, we talk about these title eliminator matches and these matches where Roosh gets a world title shot. We know Roosh isn't winning the world title, but in this tournament, we know Roosh could beat Jon Moxley. We know Roosh could beat Bryan Danielson, just the way it's structured. I feel like it's amazing for the product. And I think if you structure things around it, it's a great thing you can do annually and have the stories evolve from it as time goes on. You mentioned Daniel Garcia, Brody King, but there's going to be these one-off feuds that happen out of this, and character development, and people that are, feeling good about their performance, and others like Daniel Garcia, not so much.
I love it.
Let's get to the quick hitters and talk about all the other news in wrestling. Quick hitters. All right, starting with quick hitters, we had the news that Triple H was not at Raw last Monday, and everyone was asking why. But Paul Levesque and Nick Khan were in LA this week trying to finalize a deal for Raw that was also in Nashville. So during most of the negotiation period, FX has been seen as the favorite to land Raw. However, Netflix, USA, Warner Brothers Discovery, WBD, and Amazon Prime have all been talked about as well. Meltzer did give some information about this in the newsletter. Meltzer wrote that Khan met with WBD in October about Raw possibly going to TNT or TBS, which is obviously the current home of AEW programming. So Meltzer said this in the newsletter regarding WBD, which would be the game changer in many ways if it happened. The WBD version told to many this past week is that Nick Khan last week went to WBD in October with a pitch and was turned down. There's always the caveat that because of the relationship with AEW that a surprise could happen. But it's one of those things where those in WBD have privately said there's nothing to the idea that TBS or TNT, it is the destination for the show to a number of people in recent days. So those in WWE constantly had WBD as a long shot for the reason they believe WBD owned a percentage of AEW. So we know that they're looking for the rights and the number to be there. This, again, we talk about, you call it this shadow warfare of WWE. This is front and center. This is on the main stage, trying to kind of meddle in the affair. And this is business as business goes, but for them to be in, and negotiations will definitely make wrestling more attractive, but the scary thought is Raw could usurp AEW on TNT or TBS, and AEW is left looking for a home with their boxes in hand. That's a scary thought to me.
Yeah, that's that clandestine cloak and dagger approach that WWE goes, oh, there's such a, they don't come out and say anything bad in the press. Yeah, because they're doing all their devious deeds are behind closed doors, whispered in the ears of executives. That's how they work, guys. This is like politics 101 with WWE. I don't see it happening. I think the report that WWE believe WBD owns a percentage of AEW, I believe that to be true. I do think they have a small stake in it. I don't think they have a decision-making stake. I think Tony has been very upfront. Like, he would be willing to parse out percentages of the company to other people, but he would never take away his decision-making power in the company. Like, he's never going to sell off a part where someone's going to be able to tell him what to do. It's similar to Vince. I mean, Vince always structured all their deals where he still had, the power at the end of the day. I think WBD 100% has stake in this company on a very small level, but what do? It doesn't make sense to me for them. Like, say we are running off the opinion that they do have a stake in the company. Why would they why would they go away from that when they're earning money, owning an ownership percentage, to go to a company where they're going to sign a 5-year deal, and in 5 years they're going to have to renegotiate and then pay even more money? It's a cheaper deal for them to stay in the business of AEW.
So WWE's hoping to receive $400 million per year for the rights to air Raw. Analysts believe the number will be closer to $387 million. So in the deal announced in September, WWE will receive $287 million per year for the USA Network to air SmackDown beginning October of 2024. They're looking for a lot of money, but as you mentioned, the cheaper option, there's tiers to this thing where WWE obviously is the biggest, the baddest, the most expensive car on the lot. AEW, luxury car, great content,
affordable,
affordable. But then go down the list where wrestling is attractive, so you're going to get the NWAs and the Impacts and maybe even NXT to a lesser extent, since they are kind of separate of WWE as far as presentation goes in their end. There is a cheaper option out there. And I think this is, again, silver lining, trying to be positive here. There is a lot to be said about wrestling in the mindset of live programming and keeping things afloat, whether it goes to streaming. We know WWE always is at the forefront. It seemed like if you go back to the last negotiation process, like years ago before the original one was negotiated with Fox, when they mentioned Netflix and Amazon, it seemed like such a far cry. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be this go around. I think, to me, they're probably going to stay with USA, but moving to Netflix or Amazon Prime is a realist possibility as ever.
I think the Raw deal could send shockwaves through the wrestling community, because I think there's a bigger possibility of them going streaming than a lot of people think. None of us know what's going on behind the closed doors. We have no clue, but just gut feeling, I think Amazon Prime has a real shot at this. I really do. And I think it could be we saw that Amazon got in the NFL business with the Thursday night football game. So if they want to hitch their wagon to a wrestling company and take it off of cable, it'll be interesting to see what that does to the wrestling landscape moving forward. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects other wrestling companies. If they're starting to move away, it would be a very WWE thing to do, to hitch their quote unquote flagship show to a streaming service. They've always been ahead of the curve, with the creation of the network and tapping into streaming. I think that's something that could happen. So it's something to watch.
So also in the news, WWE announced a United States Championship tournament to crown a new number one contender to Logan Paul's title. So 8 competitors will take part in the tournament, with the winner facing Logan Paul for the U.S. title at a date yet to be announced. Guys in this tournament: Bobby Lashley, Karrion Kross, Dragon Lee, Santos Escobar, Kevin Owens, Grayson Waller, Austin Theory, and then one NXT star to be announced will be the participants. The tournament will begin on next week's SmackDown's Tribute to the Troops show, paired with first-round bouts. Dragon Lee will face Santos Escobar in one contest, while Bobby Lashley takes on Karrion Kross in the other. The 2 remaining first-round matches have yet to be announced. They're trying to set up a contender here, but this rings hollow to me with this tournament with the Continental Classic going on the other channel. But again, maybe they'll give something for Karrion Kross to do. Looking at this, I feel like Santos Escobar is next in line. Kevin Owens and Grayson Waller are tied up together. Bobby Lashley doing his own thing with the Street Profits. To me, it's set up for Santos Escobar to move away from the LWO, Rey Mysterio injury type of stuff to go after a championship. And who knows, maybe he gets elevated by this Logan Paul program.
Yeah, that seems like where they're heading. Thank God Karrion Kross is on our TV. Where has that guy been? I mean, I know a lot of WWE fans look at Karrion and it's kind of underwhelming, but man, I just always think of Killer Kross, what he was doing. There's so much. He's similar in WWE to what Malachi is in AEW. I think AEW's trying to get House of Black a little more steam behind them, but Karrion could be so much bigger. And it's shocking now that Triple H is behind it. I thought he would put a little more heat behind the guy because the package is there. It's just he's not hitting with that fan base.
So we had some announcements about ROH Final Battle happening on Friday, December 15th. So during the Thursday's Ring of Honor TV episode, Athena is set to defend her title against her minion, Billy Starks. So you mentioned the story kind of coming to fruition, but Starks defeated Marina Shafir in a bout on Thursday's episode. But then after, she was embarrassed by Athena when the women's world champion named Lexi Nair the valedictorian of the Minion Training Class 2023. After feeling snubbed, Starks attacked Athena, stood over the champion with her belt, and the match was officially announced for Final Battle. So we also have other stuff going on with the card. They've mentioned that there's going to be a Keith Lee versus Shane Taylor match that's happening. We're going to crown a new TV champion. So yeah, here we are with this card that's emerging for Final Battle. Is it going to be enough for people to check out? I know that on the in-ring product, always it lives up to the reputation of ROH, but as you mentioned, there's been less steam and momentum on ROH than ever, especially now that they vacated from Joe. It feels like it's on an island on its own. But maybe all the money that goes into ROH and comes from it, maybe it just feels like extra to them, and this is a way for them to give some credence to characters that are not able to be showcased because of time constraints with the AEW side, and help people like Billy Starks get the reps needed to eventually take the next step.
Yeah, and you know, I think people are down there doing their thing and getting shined up. We saw that with Ethan Page. Ethan Page has been doing a lot of work in ROH. Now his body's ripped and shredded, and he came out on Collision and challenged Kenny Omega to a match next week in Collision. So I think it's a place to kind of get guys ready for the next step. I will say I really enjoy the Shane Taylor Keith Lee situation. I'd like to see them heat that up. I don't necessarily know about a feud between them long term, but you know, they tagged together on the indies. I think I'm a big Shane Taylor fan, back to, you know, ROH pre Tony Khan, and you know, Shane Taylor and Keith Lee and Lee Moriarty, that's a good trios, like throw them in the trios division in AEW. I would love to see Shane Taylor Promotions with those three guys going after those titles. Shane Taylor, man, is a hell of a fucking promo. Like, if you go back in our archives and visit the tavern, we talked to Shane Taylor, love his mindset, love his love of the business. And Athena, I said it at the top of the show, I think she's doing the best women's work of any company. She's just not getting the showcase on a major platform right now. She's kind of toiling away on Honor Club. But if you want just great matches, it is a far, far cry from Ember Moon in NXT. She is killing the game right now. And the fact that she's saddled up this 19-year-old, I believe, 18 or 19-year-old Billy Starks and really sharpening that blade, she's doing great work, because she's not only elevating her own character, but she's taking a young talent along the way and building her up with her as well. So I like what they're doing. It's a far cry from the ROH pre-Tony Khan. You know, I know it has this history and legacy, and everyone's kind of feels a certain way about how it's being handled by Tony Khan. But I think for business, the better move is to make it a breeding ground for AEW. AEW needs to be the major leagues, and Ring of Honor really take the place to grow your next generation of talent for All Elite Wrestling. So
also in the news here, we have Austin versus CM Punk on the horizon. This has been rumored, obviously, as a dream match for a long period of time. Not that Austin's an active competitor. We've seen him compete at WrestleMania 2 years back against Kevin Owens. But the idea is believed to have been already discussed with CM Punk, with sources noting that the ideal scenario would be for the two to meet in person and discuss ideas as the next step. So this was noted in the report that there's a lot to get through first before the match can be made. We know the history there. There was that famous 2K sit-down interview that they had leading up to the release of the video game. But also Austin has been, obviously he has a platform now with social media and a podcast. He's been asked about CM Punk even in recent days. And Austin and Punk appear to have a mutual admiration for each other. Austin praised Punk during an interview with Forbes earlier this year. He also addressed the idea that he was an influence on Punk's career. So the quote here was, this is Austin talking about CM Punk. He said, great promo guy, great worker. He's got his own thing going and we're just friends. So I think I remember there's a picture of myself and him from Chicago, my favorite town to work in, my favorite building. And I guess he had come down to where we were all hanging out. Maybe he looked up to me back in the day, but I don't know if I so much mentored him because I think he paid his own dues. He learned it the way he did and he got over on his own merits. The fact maybe I could have been somewhat of an influence would be flattering if that were the case, but he's made his own career. The other caveat, Chad, I have to add here, Punk also wore a Steve Austin t-shirt while delivering the famous pipe bomb. And you know they love those Easter eggs showing it on a promo package that's waiting to be tapped into. This is similar to like the Goldberg-Austin type of match, the dream matches that you dream up in your mind on video games with your action figures. Will it live up? Probably not to the level you want it to. But with WWE, with the smoke and mirrors, the machine, they could figure things out. I mean, Vince McMahon was in the ring at 70-something years old. Like, they'll figure out a way to make it serviceable. And last time Austin was out there, I was critical about them doing it and, like, kind of thawing out the in-ring career of Austin, especially with how protected his legacy was. He didn't do anything that was, no,
it was fun.
It was fun, So, like, I feel like with this way that things operate now, they can make it happen and actually make it something that people look forward to and remember fondly.
No, I'm with you. I was critical of Austin coming back. I thought he had the Jim Brown type of career where he went out at the top. I mean, I know he took an L going out against The Rock, but his legacy was so concrete and locked in that I had a problem with it. But the match with Kevin Owens, I think it was WrestleMania 38.
Yep, in Texas. Yep,
it was awesome. I mean, it was playing the hits. You had Vince McMahon come down. I mean, it was a fun time. And I got to say, like, everyone's talking Punk Roman or Punk Rollins. I think you do Punk Rollins at maybe Rumble. And if this is even anywhere on the table, you've got a tentpole Mania coming up. This is WrestleMania 40. And there's been rumors saying that behind the scenes at WWE, they want to make this the biggest, most exciting WrestleMania of all time. I know they want that every year, but I think there's an emphasis. Like, we got to make 40 feel special. You put that poster out of the Texas Rattlesnake against the Voice of the Voiceless, staring each other down on a Mania 40 poster. Doesn't get much bigger than that, man. Doesn't get much bigger. And I would be here for it. If they put all the smoke and mirrors, all the bells and whistles behind it to make it fun for the fans, just to see those two just iconic anti-heroes clashing, man, I would enjoy to watch that. I would be all about that.
So, of course, CM Punk continues to be in the news cycle here, and Kevin Owens was speaking with sports journalist James Williams to promote next month's WWE Holiday Tour. It's a house show in LA. So during the interview, Owens was asked about Punk's WWE return and what it means for the pro wrestling business. So I want your take on this because this was really fascinating. The video is very laggy, so it wouldn't even be worth pulling it. It's almost like it was on a 2003 Skype call, like the emerging technology. But this is the quote. Kevin Owens said, "I just want to have fun at work. So if he's got that mindset, great." So we know that there's been a definitely adversarial relationship between the two of them when they worked together in ROH earlier in their careers. Owens is great friends with the Young Bucks. He appeared to tweet out a dig at Punk on the night of the Brawlout incident in September 2022. There's the other piece of comparing this to his quote about Randy Orton, where he goes off on a diatribe of positivity. Yeah. In the interview, he was asked about Orton. The same question on a tee for him. He said, "I love Randy. I'm so happy he's back, and he's much needed to me. Having him around in the locker room is an absolute positive." You know, there's just some people, besides the fact he's a fantastic performer and he's a legend, there's some people that are just good to have around. He's good to have around. He's good for morale. And he brings a sense of, you know, there are people, which is what I love about the locker room currently. There are people that are leaders without saying, I'm a leader. They don't need to be. They just are. Randy's one of them. So when he's around, everybody just steps up their game just because Randy Orton's here. And I love that. All right. So, man, this was saying so much without saying anything about CM Punk. Like, you could just, this tells there's still some tension there. And this is some of the waters have to be navigated. And there's history there. I know that, you know, there's the story about Punk ripping on Owens for being a t-shirt wrestler, and people don't forget that shit, you know, like
it's, hey man, what do you think about Orton? 2 paragraphs. Hey man, what do you think about CM Punk? I just want to have fun at work. So if he's got that mindset, great. That's all you need to know.
Dude, and also the leader part, him talking about him, he's a leader without saying he's the leader. Like, that was direct. Come on.
Well, the 2 paragraphs of flowery superlatives directed at Randy Orton, all of those superlatives directed at Randy Orton were veiled insults at CM Punk and how he was kind of perceived in AEW. If you don't see that, you're blind. It's totally what was going on. And a big part of it is what you said. He's friends with the Bucks. Kevin Owens was getting, I'm sure he heard stories that we do not hear the stories to as fans. So he's got a lot more knowledge of the situation. Like you said, after All Out, the tweet he took a dig at Punk at, he's hearing what happened. And I'm with Owens, man. I just want to have fun at work. Don't bring your bullshit here, because we don't need that bullshit. Randy Orton comes, he doesn't have to say a word, and we respect that he's there. I think you're dead on accurate, man. Look at the 2 responses, the same question, and look how he responds to both. Kevin Owens has skeptical hippo eyes. He's looking at Punk like, we'll see how this goes.
So if you guys are trying to remember what the tweet was, it was just a picture of him main eventing WrestleMania in a t-shirt against Steve Austin wearing a t-shirt. So those are the veiled attempts. And again, all the online sleuths are trying to figure out what it meant by that. But we also had WWE has confirmed a few appearances from Roman Reigns. He'll be making this December. So we have 3 dates: December 15th on SmackDown in Green Bay, Wisconsin, January 5th, SmackDown, the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, British Columbia, and then January 19th, SmackDown, State Farms Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's expected that Reigns will make his next title defense at the Rumble on January 27th. Dave Meltzer has reported WWE is not currently planning a Reigns versus Knight rematch of the PLE. So we don't know who the opponent will be. So maybe it's going to be a layup. Maybe it's going to be a revisit of something. Maybe they go with Kevin Owens for, like, how many years in a row it's been Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns for the title. I feel like this is an annual event. They heat up Kevin Owens and he loses to Roman Reigns. So
seems like they're positioning Randy Orton. To me,
that could definitely be there. And it's just the best. I mean, might as well capitalize. He's there. It's not going to be your WrestleMania program. Go in there with Randy Orton.
And how lucky are we that we get to see Roman 3 times between now and January 19th? Man, dude, take the title off this dude. It's been, like, come on, man. I'm sick of this. Like, you got to be there. You don't have to be there every week, but don't pad the numbers of your title reign and you're not there. There's an asterisk there for me.
So just to clarify, there also at the Alamo Dome in Texas, Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens for the United States. I mean, for the WWE Universal Championship, and at the Royal Rumble 2022 was again Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens. So I feel like there's a history here that they could go down that path and revisit it. But you, like you said, maybe you want to use that with Randy Orton and set him up for whatever his program will be down the line for. Royal Rumble 2022 was Seth Rollins. So it's been 2 years. I just had to look it up to clarify. But if you want to use Randy Orton, if you're not going to WrestleMania with that program, it's going to be Cody Rhodes. What's a better precursor than Randy Orton being back and giving a little bit more shine to that championship program?
Absolutely.
So if Shawn Michaels was talking about Dominic Mysterio, and during the appearance on the Ringers Cheap Heat podcast, which again is a vehicle that usually has WWE talent on there. Michaels discussed what it's been like to have Dominic in NXT. Michaels called Dominic the MVP of WWE this year for the work he's done both in NXT and on the main roster. Michaels said a lot about was put on Dominic early in his career, but he's grown a lot. He's a hell of a performer. You guys can go check out the quote from this interview. He's been very complimentary. I was saying this kind of tongue in cheek in the group chat. Dom's one of my favorite things to watch in WWE. He feels to me one of the most developed characters, and I enjoy watching him on my screen. And maybe he's not the MVP for WWE this year, but he's damn close. He's in the finalists, right?
I mean, the transformation he's made is second to none. I mean, people were burying this kid, saying send him to NXT like as a bad thing. And I think, yeah, he's definitely one of the more interesting, fun people to watch. So I can see Sean's point here.
So we also had WWE and NXT on-air personality Mackenzie Mitchell has been released from the company and continues to shed employees following their September merger with UFC to form the new TKO. So Mitchell went on Twitter Friday to both announce the news and reflect on her time in the company. We know that Mitchell joined WWE back in September 2019, fresh off a stint with Impact Wrestling, in addition to working with both Fox Sports West and Fangirl Sports in her career. So she and WWE NXT broadcaster Vic Joseph got married back in October 2022. This is more kind of behind the scenes stuff. We're seeing shedding of employees, duplicate positions, all this stuff. So they laid off more than 100 employees at this point in a variety of departments as TKO followed through with their promises in finding ways, what they're called efficiencies, but mostly cost-cutting methods.
Yeah, I wish you the best in your future endeavors.
So we also have Ronda Rousey confirms that she has no plans of joining AEW right now, despite wrestling one match at Ring of Honor. There's a lot about this in the newsletter talking about this, but they made it clear that this was a one-show appearance that was kind of lightning in a bottle to figure it out. And here we are at this point. Ronda Rousey, not that I want to see her in AEW, but it feels like she's kind of testing the waters out there in the independent scene. But, you know, I didn't expect her to be involved with AEW full-time. So if people did, I don't know, you're not reading the room right.
No, I didn't expect it. I think it was just her helping out her friend Marina. They're longtime friends. I wouldn't be shocked if she got roped into maybe an all-in performance to add a little gasoline on the fire for that big event. But I don't see any long-term deal. I think she's happy being on the farm, being a mother. I think, nothing to see here.
So we have Serena Deeb's ready to return to the ring. So in an Instagram video posted on Thursday, she revealed that her long absence from AEW programming was due to a series of unprovoked seizures that began in October 2022. She also announced that her neurologist has cleared her to return to the ring and she hopes to be back soon. So well wishes to Serena Deeb. I'm glad she's okay. No one knew what she was dealing with, but she has been gone for quite some time. Her last match took place October 18th, 2022 on AEW Dark Elevation tapings, and she's been at backstage at AEW Collision last month. She previously attended the Cauliflower Alley Club banquet this summer. She was the presenter for Mickie James, so she's been out and about, but thought she wasn't being utilized. I'm glad to hear she's okay, though.
Yeah, go look at Serena Deeb's social media. Super emotional video. I'm glad she's back. I'm glad she's healthy. I'm a big Serena Deeb fan. I thought she was great for the women's division. The Professor, she's so good in ring. She added a lot to it, so I'm happy she's healthy.
So we have this final story here in the quick hitters. Bandito is going to be out of action for longer than expected. So the 28-year-old suffered a triangular fibrocartilage complex injury, which is the bones that connect the forearm to the wrist. At least that's what they tell me. In June, during a match with Takeshita, it is believed he had surgery to repair the injury. In early July, he'd been on track to return in December. I think we actually announced he was ready to come.
Yeah.
Back. He was booked for the show for the Riot promotion in Mexico. That's what we announced here. And apparently, another surgery on the wrist is needed because it did not heal properly. So, who knows? I mean, if the timeline was got the surgery in July, ready in December, if we start that clock over again, it's gonna be a while until we see Bandito.
Yeah, I want to see him back. He's got so much charisma. Probably my favorite young up and coming luchador right now. And honestly, if he was healthy and ready to go, I would not have been shocked to see him in the Continental Classic. I think they want him to be there. So I'm happy to I'll be happy, I should say, to see him healthy. And I hate to hear that he has to do this. Real quick, just before we get out, one final story I wanted to touch on, because there's been so much heat from fans with this. Britt Baker came out kind of discrediting the promo time, saying that MJF got this amount of promo, Christian Cage got this amount of promo. I've got 0 on-screen in-ring promo time in 2023. Britt's been on the table for a long time. Fans are saying, oh, she's burying the company. This isn't good. This isn't a good look. Guys, I think there's a little more. I think she's working you, man. I think this is part of a storyline. I have my theories I'll hold for another show, but hold tight. Britt is a company girl. I think there's something at play here. So just don't worry. She's not disgruntled. I think this is all part of a bigger scheme.
Just look at who liked the tweets. Wardlow, Jack Perry, people that are involved in the storyline. This is a bigger picture. This is playing 4D chess right now with the story. So
absolutely.
Let's get to Dave's raves and talk about his match of the week and performer of the week.
Dave raves.
Uncle Dave Meltzer dropping the newsletter on Friday. His match of the week was the War Games match from Survivor Series on the men's side. Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn, Jey Uso, Seth Rollins, and Randy Orton taking on Finn Balor, Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, JD McDonough, and Drew McIntyre. His performer of the week was someone who wasn't in ring. It was Christian Cage. He was very complimentary of the promo and the heel work. I love that pick.
I love
Christian Cage getting the performer of the week.
Yeah, Christian's killing it, man. Best work of his career, in my opinion.
So he also dropped a lot of the stuff, and there's a longer diatribe of information about AEW and talking about the perception out there with fans about this financial success or lack thereof. But this is the quote I wanted to read to you guys because, again, people are singing the demise of AEW, that they're going to go out in a burst of flames and disappear. But Meltzer said, in a year where the perception of AEW has certainly gone down, as have key business metrics like live average attendance at most shows and television ratings, particularly for the weekend shows, it is also a year of major revenue growth. AEW is expected to finish this year grossing 107 million to 175 million in revenue, a figure higher than most anticipated, particularly since 2022 was the first year to hit 100 million and barely topped that figure. Where the final number stands will be based on what end up being the final numbers for the All Out through World's End pay-per-views, as well as where the company's cut off of TV ad revenue winds up, as AEW, unlike WWE, does get a cut of ad revenue from the 3 TV shows. He continues to talk about the growth was the more pay-per-view shows. Wembley itself generates $16.5 million between the live gay pay-per-view and merchandise, not even including sponsorships. They have the video game revenue added to this. Ticket sales for All In, even like for the upcoming event coming up, have already gone on sale. Moral of the story, guys, is AEW is fine. Can we get shirts that say AEW is fine? They're more than fine, Chad.
Right. 29,000 tickets on a pre-sale for a show that is 9 months away. When they did their first show in London, I think it was 5 months out, I want to say. We're 9 months out, not a single match announced. They sold 29,000 tickets. We've got 9 months for matches. I don't know if they'll reach the 80,000+ for the show. They're coming back literally another year, 1 year later. So it might be down a little bit, but yeah, all is well, man. Things are looking up. They're going to consistently grow. AEW is fine.
AEW is fine. Keep reiterating that to people that want to say. And you mentioned the toxicity of social media. My advice to every wrestling fan is stay the fuck away from it. Like I would like after a show, like the urge may be to see what the consensus opinion on stuff is. And usually it's negative. And then if I'm watching a show and then reading the tweets, it almost infiltrates your brain where you're just like, you can't enjoy the show. So in my opinion, only follow the people you want to follow Turnbuckle Tavern, follow the people that you enjoy. But at the end of the day, stay off the masses, because
and don't get caught up in the comments. The comments are full of idiots.
It's very true. And there, it's similar to our page as well. There's a lot of stuff in the negativity in the comments, like you mentioned. It's just initiating conflict just because that's their identity. People love to have their opinion be on a platform, but I don't give it any credence. I don't answer any of those people. So
post and go.
Let's get to the week ahead and preview what's coming up in pro wrestling.
The week ahead.
right, here for the week ahead, WWE Raw this Monday. The World Heavyweight Championship will be defended. Seth Rollins against Jey Uso. Drew McIntyre versus Sami Zayn. We get a 2 out of 3 falls match. DIY versus Imperium. Shayna Baszler versus Nia Jax. And Cody Rhodes will cut a promo and address the issues with Shinsuke Nakamura. I love like this card, man. 2 or 3 falls with DIY and Imperium. That's cut from the old Saturday Night's Main Event that we've been covering on Shot Nostalgia Season 5.
Yeah, that's a hell of a tag match. I love both of those teams. And Cody and Shinsuke, I'm intrigued by this.
And also, I mean, Jey Uso getting a title shot. I don't think the time is for him to win the title, but I mean, he definitely has a main event presence. It's pretty awesome. Yeah. On NXT on Tuesday, we have Dragunov and Baron Corbin going face-to-face. We have an Iron Survivor Challenge last chance qualifier. Kiana James versus Roxanne Perez versus Fallon Henley versus Thea Hale. We also have an Iron Survivor Challenge last chance qualifier for the men. Carmelo Hayes versus Eddie Thorpe versus Joe Coffey versus Tyler Bate. Finishing up with Alpha Academy, Otis, Chad Gable, and Maxime Dupree versus Metaphor, Noam Dar, Oro Menza, and Lash Legend. So that's happening on Tuesday. Shawn Michaels' vehicle.
Yeah, they're hitting all cylinders. I'm a big Dragunov fan, so I always tune in for him.
On AEW Dynamite, the TNT Championship on the line, Christian versus Adam Copeland. AEW's Women's World Championship being defended, Toni Storm versus Sky Blue. 3 Continental Classic Gold League matches, Swerve Strickland versus Mark Briscoe, Jon Moxley versus Roosh, Jay Lethal versus Jay White. A lot of Jays going on there. So going to be a great week of Dynamite.
Yeah, that Moxley Roosh match is going to be brutal.
On Impact, we don't have the card yet, but they did film Monterrey, Mexico, so I'm assuming they're going to take some matches there. Vikingo will be in action, Motor City Machine Guns. So we'll keep you up to date with that. The graphic I made for it has the Mexico AAA co-promotional show, so I hope that's what they're doing. We will see and wait for the announcement. It usually happens, today or tomorrow. We also have on SmackDown, CM Punk returning to the show. The U.S. Championship No More Contenders tournament begins. First round, Bobby Lashley versus Karrion Kross, Dragon Lee versus Santos Escobar in the same tournament, and then Charlotte Flair versus Asuka in a one-off match in the women's division.
Yeah, let's see how this U.S. title tournament goes. Let's do it.
AEW Collision on Saturday, Kenny Omega versus Ethan Page, and we get 2 Blue League matches, Bryan Danielson versus Andrade El Idolo, and Eddie Kingston versus Claudio Castagnoli. It's a lot at stake here on the AEW programming side with all these tournament matches. I absolutely love it.
A lot of good week in wrestling ahead, so let's tune in, guys. Check it all out.
Well, that's all we got, Chad. Lead us out, man. This has been a great week of pro wrestling. Always excited to do this show, and looking forward to the next couple weeks as we approach our 1-year mark.
Yeah, man, we're getting close. January 1 will be a year in. Guys, go to theturnbuckletavern.com. Everything is there. Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You'll find everything we have going on. All of our shows, 7 days a week. We're dropping video or audio for you. Everything you need about every wrestling company. It's all here at the Turnbuckle Tavern. Again, theturnbuckletavern.com, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe, tell your friends, leave a review. All of that good stuff. And until next Monday, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Reach for the sky, boy.